XRP holders, we have a pretty big issue happening in the crypto market right now that a lot of people are just overlooking because, again, there's not a lot of noise around it. However, we are 100% focused on it because it is a concerning factor, especially when it comes back to, control of crypto and who will be the voice of reason around crypto. And this is, again, something that we need to focus on because for well over now, roughly like 6 years or so, we've been kind of building towards this moment in crypto where, the SEC lawsuit is behind us, which was a major obstacle for XRP. And of course, we've speculated for years on who was behind that lawsuit. Was it the big bankers? Was it, the players from ETHgate? And I still think that, the big banks were definitely there to hold back XRP and Ripple. I think that they wanted to stall them out a bit because they were terrified of the tech. And even today, I still think that the big banks are terrified of crypto tech. And we'll talk about that here in a moment. But let's start off with, of course, the market structure bill, because we are now in the days of counting down until the markup officially happens, which is, of course, the 15th. We have been putting a spotlight on it. Obviously, the main thing that we are looking at is what the bill addresses. The main things here are, of course, token classification, stablecoin regulation, exchange oversight, and compliance. This is definitely going to be a very big one for the space. Obviously, yes, there's a lot of weight behind it, but I feel as if right now this is kind of overshadowing the Genius Act. And you might say, well, Nick, the Genius Act already got voted on. It's already, greenlit. We're just waiting for it to go into effect. And that's the big issue. That's the big issue happening right now, because while we wait for the market structure bill, we're starting to see the big banks trying to force the hand of regulators. Let's address this. Let's go back to the end of December, actually. So back in the end of December, we did get an update from Cryptos R Us, which was Brian Armstrong says reopening the Genius Act is a red line. Coinbase CEO Brian Armstrong is pushing back against bank lobbying to reopen the Genius Act, the 2025 law that created the first clear U.S. framework for blockchain-based payments and on-chain financial services. He says banks want to undo parts of it to slow blockchain adoption and protect their existing business model. Armstrong argues this isn't about safety, it's about blocking competition, and predicts banks will eventually switch sides once they see the profit in operating on blockchain rails instead of resisting them. A fight could be brewing between old guard banking and the next era of blockchain finance. And yeah, this is definitely a concerning time in this market. While we are awaiting market structure, the big banks want to reopen the Genius Act and tinker with the rules, if you will. In fact, what they want to do is completely cut off the ability to pay interest and yield on stablecoins, something that's been really the powerhouse behind DeFi for years now. This is very concerning. They essentially want to cut off DeFi. This is a big piece of the market, and it's a piece of the market that has driven major adoption of crypto for years now. But it gets even worse because this has been going on for months, ever since we got the green light. Here we have from Thinking Crypto 1 back in September, guys. Banks want to stop stablecoins. Banks are having buyer's remorse over the recently passed stablecoin legislation, aka the Genius Act, and are trying to change it. Summer Mersinger, CEO of the Blockchain Association, gives the details. Check this out.
Well, what is happening is, I think the bankers maybe were flat-footed. If you're worried about losing deposits because there's a higher reward offered by an exchange on a stablecoin, higher your APR for your savings accounts, right? You compete. And so it's really frustrating to have them come back and say, oh, I guess we don't like this and we want to change it.
So it seems like the crypto industry has another fight on its hands, and we're used to it now.
Yeah, we've got to push back because I think some of it is misinformation. And certainly we have to push back on any kind of myths that are out there, misinformation that's being sent out from the banking community. So it's not like we're picking this fight, but we're going to have to respond to it.
So yeah, listen, the big banks, they have always tried to fight this industry, and they're going to still continue to try to fight this industry every single step of the way. They want to try to force their hand into this game. And even now, they are starting to still reopen the Genius Act. They're still trying to do this at least. And what's even crazier about this is I do think that this is on par with that meeting that happened back in the beginning of December where major banks were discussing crypto with senators. This is from Citi, Bank of America, Wells Fargo. They all, met with senators back in the beginning of December. And this was all regarding the crypto market structure legislation. I also think that there was a lot of discussions on the Genius Act as well. There's a lot of problems here when banks start to get into the regulatory side, because again, they can start to force their hand. They can start to play with the rules a bit to benefit them and essentially cut off DeFi in a big way. That's what they want to do. They want to try to kill DeFi. And it's because of the, overall rewards that DeFi does offer. It completely goes against what banks offer. I mean, you got to think about it like this. It's all competition. They want to make sure that they continuously thrive regardless of if we're in a digital age of finance or not. But that's the thing. Banks need to adapt or they will die. I don't believe that the Genius Act is going to get reopened. At least not as long as we fight it. And we need to make sure that we are voicing our opinion here, because even here we have from the Chief Policy Officer of Coinbase. You guys probably remember me including this in a video recently because China agreed to pay interest on digital yuan in bid to boost adoption. That was back in the end of December because they were seeing what was happening in the US with these big banks lobbying against the Genius Act, trying to reopen it and cut off rewards for stablecoins, which would also kill interest, yield, all on stablecoins. And China is trying to compete now. Now, why am I bringing up all of this? Well, because we have over here from January 7th, the American Bankers Association new today community bank leaders urge Senate to protect local lending from stablecoin risk. New U.S. community banks push to close Genius Act loophole, allowing exchanges to offer stablecoin yields, claiming it undercuts traditional banking. This is absolutely insane. They are literally telling us, hey, guess what? We can't compete with stablecoins offering these crazy yields. We can only offer less than 1%, which is just ridiculous. The average national standard for yield in a savings account is not even 1%. Within this space with stablecoin yield, you can generate 5% plus. On some DEX platforms, you can even earn more than 10+% on stablecoins. The big banks are terrified of this. They want to cut this off, but this is just not going to work. It's not going to work. I honestly think as long as we are voicing our opinion, making sure that our voice is heard, we will get around these big banks trying to reopen the Genius Act so that they could push their controls onto the DeFi markets. And we even have over here, Justin, banks versus blockchain heats up. U.S. community banks are lobbying to reopen the Genius Act, pushing to remove provisions that allow crypto exchanges to offer crypto or stablecoin yields, arguing it undercuts traditional banking. Brian Armstrong fires back saying banks are simply trying to block competition. His view, resistance is futile. Banks will eventually be forced to operate on blockchain rails rather than fight them. And yeah, that's exactly where this is headed. But remember who the American Bankers Association is. Number one, they have so many donations to big politicians like Brad Sherman, for an example, who has always been anti-crypto. And not to mention that they are trusted by over 1,300 banks. It's insane how many banks are tied back to them, and not to mention their board of directors, which are all tied back to big and small banks. If you're scrolling down here, you can see their 3-year term, right? They have Wells Fargo on here, Bank of America, some pretty big banks as well. And you also have JP Morgan on here. I mean, it's crazy to look at all of the names here, and it's very easy to understand who's actually controlling these major pushbacks to regulations that are essentially choking out banks. It's all the big bankers, Citi, Bank of America, JP Morgan, Wells Fargo. They're all trying to attack this industry at every step of the way to make sure that they are staying in the game. But just like Brian Armstrong is saying here, yeah, they will eventually be forced to operate on blockchain. I do think that every single bank will be forced to jump into crypto in a much heavier way. And we just got an update from the Chief Policy Officer at Coinbase. We have the Senate Banking Committee marks up the market structure bill next week, and stablecoin rewards remain under debate. Congress already settled this in Genius. Reopening it now only creates uncertainty and risk the future of the US dollar as commerce moves on chain. Here's why Congress should protect the Genius Act and why rewards help consumers without harming community banks. Number one, it's no mystery why big banks want rewards banned. US banks earn $176 billion per year on the $3 trillion they park at the Fed, and another $187 billion per year from card swipe fees, which is roughly $14.40 per household. That's $360 billion plus annually from payments and deposits alone, and massive unused lending capacity that the Federal Reserve pays the banks to have sit in a drawer somewhere. Stablecoin rewards threaten those margins, not because it reduces banks' ability to lend, but because they introduce real competition in payments. Lower payment cost means billions in savings for consumers and businesses and a boost to GDP. This is not a community bank issue. It's the big banks. That's the real fight. The data is clear, and it doesn't support the bank's positions. This summer, Charles River Associates found no statistically significant relationship between USDC growth and community bank deposits. Different users, different use cases, and people don't treat stablecoins as bank deposit substitutes. Independent research from Cornell confirms this. Stablecoin adoption does not reduce bank lending. In fact, rewards would need to approach 6% to meaningfully affect deposits. No one is offering anything close to that. Now, again, they're talking about major platforms like Coinbase. And no, most of them do not offer 6% plus. That is only on roughly DEXs or within the DeFi space. On a lot of these exchanges that are offering yield on stablecoins, it's roughly like 5% or less. But still, they are offering way more than what banks can offer. The irony is that stablecoins present a huge transformational opportunity for banks. Adaptation is hard for any sector, maybe especially banks, but Congress should not get in the way, as Cornell's Professor Kong says. And yeah, we do have here that, essentially Congress should not get in the way, and that, to really look at stablecoins and the opportunities that they present, banks need to stay on the sidelines, and we need Congress to stay on the sidelines. Obviously, yes, with proper regulations like the Genius Act that do not have constricting rules tied to it, stablecoins will continue to thrive and continue to grow. And that's exactly what we need and what we want. And of course, as the Senate deliberates, China understands the opportunity the bank lobby is poised to give them and announces that they will pay interest to users of the digital yuan. Undermining the supremacy of the USD has been a long-standing goal of the PRC. The Senate banning rewards would be a big assist to China's efforts. And yeah, it's not just an issue for crypto. It's an issue for USD-backed stablecoins in a big way. Obviously, I don't think that if we banned rewards for USD stablecoins, that China would essentially lead. I mean, nobody's really going to touch digital yuan outside of China because nobody really trusts it. But regardless of that, it's still the competitive base here. Like, we're still seeing competition here in a big way, and we can't sit here and really argue back and forth about if stablecoin rewards should be a thing or not. They 100% should be. But if we ban it, it doesn't have to be China that's offering interest on digital yuan. It could essentially be the UK offering interest on the digital pound. It could be, it could be anyone offering interest on a digital currency that could immediately start to see a lot more demand than USD-backed stablecoins. We need to make sure that we fight this as much as possible. It would harm the DeFi sector in a big way. And we have here that the bottom line, banks oppose rewards not out of prudential concern, but because competition threatens protected revenue streams. Protecting Genius and the ability to offer rewards means lower cost, more choice, and a more competitive payments system for Americans. And of course, Brian Armstrong said China has decided to pay interest on their own stablecoin because it benefits ordinary people, and they recognize it as a competitive advantage. I worry that we are missing the forest through the trees, and the US rewards on stablecoins will not change lending one bit, but it does have a big impact on whether US stablecoins are competitive. Rewards or even paying interest benefits ordinary people just like community lending does. We have to let the market do both. And yes, we do. We cannot be we seriously cannot go back in time and start constricting this space. We need to let this space breathe. Right now, big banks want to choke this space out. It goes back to Operation Choke Point 2.0. They've always been trying to choke this space out in a big way, and we cannot let them do that. We need to make sure that stablecoins thrive. We need to make sure that DeFi thrives, and we cannot give up control to these big banks. And I'm hoping that with the market structure bill on its way, that we can make sure that big banks do not add in and, tinker with the rules a bit more, because again, if they start to really add their own rules and they start to, strong arm their way in, I do have concerns if, we're basically feeding crypto to these big banks anyways. So hopefully that's not the case. And hopefully that, we get some sort of major pushback here, especially with the Genius Act, where, we're not constricting anything, and we're making sure that we have proper regulations, and we make sure that crypto does thrive and innovation continues to thrive as well. So with that being said, I hope that you guys enjoyed this video.